Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review of The Expanse Season 1 on Amazon. And I know that this show has had some, crazy ass history because it first started on Sci-Fi, and I didn't get into it just because I think there's, other stuff going on around that time. And then, of course, it had issues pretty much trying to keep itself uh, from being canceled from Sci-Fi before Amazon picked it up. And I'm like, okay, since I've gotten some walls here, time to dive into this. And I'm really glad that I did because the new season's going to be starting this month. And granted, I've got a lot of other seasons to go through, but I have liked what I have seen so far. Though the issues of the beginning of the show really kind of mirrors like the start of Game of Thrones, where it's like there's a lot of stuff that you need to know, and it's not as well explained in the beginning as it should be. So pretty much we're in the 23rd century. We've got pretty much three main factions that we are dealing with: the UN Earth, the pretty much militaristic Mars colony, and the Belters in the belt around that pretty much supply resources to the other two while pretty much getting shit on by both. Now, that is a simplification of pretty much the world set in. There's other videos that kind of delve into it more, and I'm definitely going to read the books at some point here, even if I get through the show first, because I really am intrigued by these characters in this world that this show communicates to us. So that's pretty much the gist of it, and that pretty much sets up all the different kind of power struggles that we've got. It's very much kind of like Westeros, where you got all these different families vying for control of pretty much one kingdom, in this case the solar system, of what's going on. And we've got a lot of characters that we're introduced to, and granted, a lot of them, there's not a lot of them. There's a certain set of the supporting cast that not a lot is done with, but I will not say that they are just stand-in cardboard characters. They do provide literary function for what's going on, thereby giving us more depth into a character like one of the characters, Joe Miller, that we are introduced to. So what happens is we've got this delicate power balance that is going on, and everything's pretty much at a tipping point at almost all times. The Belters, if they don't do what one kind of group says, they pretty much can get rationed with air and water, and that's pretty much gold, as it's said in the show, to them, because they can't survive without that. And what's interesting is these people have lived out there so long, they've also developed bodily differently and linguistically differently than people on Earth and Mars, spouting some kind of Creole kind of type dialect that on Earth, or like the character of Havelock has to learn to figure out, because he's pretty much in a corporate kind of cop position and partnered with Joe Miller, who is a Belter, and he's trying to, of course, learn kind of what's going on in here, because he's taken on some cases, and he starts talking with pretty much a prostitute and using the time to kind of get her to teach him the language and all that, because he, as we see, he's like, okay, you gotta kind of know what's going on to and communicate with people to figure out what's going on in a community. It's like, all right, but see, he is more used to give us a foil and give us kind of more insight into Joe Miller, who is our main kind of cop protagonist that we follow throughout this story. Now, I say cop protagonist because he's one kind of protagonist, and then we've got Jim Holden, who is on the Canterbury, and I think that is a pretty great kind of thing, because we do get a lot of literary stuff going up throughout this show of Canterbury, and linking, of course, it to the Canterbury Tales, Chaucer's thing, where a lot of different people are, of course, on a pilgrimage to Canterbury, and we see all these different kind of characters interact, and we do see that a lot happen throughout this story. And we, of course, get other literary drops of Cervantes and Don Quixote, which evidently was a work that informed Jim Holden, as it kind of shows what he is as a character. That is like an episode called Windmills, which I really liked because it kind of bucks the trend of being like, oh, over the head with certain things. There's a lot of subtle things that you go throughout because you actually even see futuristic windmills and everything, but it's not zoomed into where you're like, you gotta catch it. And it's like, I was thinking after I saw that episode, oh, that's going to the Cervantes thing because they had an actual book of Cervantes. And of course, that deals with Don Quixote and the whole idea of knighthood and chivalry. And of course, that informed James Holden because in that. We'll get to that, but he is on pretty much an ice hauler, which is out in the belt pretty much to get ice, get water. Now, we see that in the beginning, and we see it's a tough life because the dude loses his fucking arm. And we just kind of see how it works out, and they're just pretty much interested in getting home and getting everything on time. We see, strangely enough, one character kind of going kind of basic to a degree. I would term it as being basic. It's the XO, and oddly enough, it was a dude that was on Breaking Bad. I'm like, that's kind of cool, but he's like taking a potted plant and is putting his feet on the dirt, and he's like going nuts and shoots a gun off. And the captain of the ship tries to get Holden to be the next XO, and he's like, I don't want it. It's like, okay, what's kind of going on with that? And we do get information on that later, but they of course see a distress call. They're like, if we go and answer this, we're going to get screwed. And captain's orders is to not do that. But, and of course, Holden kind of backed him up on that, even though he had a girlfriend that's like, we should help them out. Of course, it sticks in Holden's crawl. He does figure out some of a message, somebody asking for help, and he, of course, then forwards it, and they've got to, of course, go and investigate it. They do, and they see that things aren't quite right. Because in the beginning of the show, we saw that this woman was pretty much locked in some place, dealing with everything going on. I was like, what the fuck's going on? She breaks out and sees this one dude getting fucking, like, eaten or something in a reactor or something. She screams, and it's like, what the fuck? And they are going to this ship's rescue, the Scopuli. And they're like, what the fuck's kind of going on with this thing? Something went weird. They find out that there's, like, a breach going on. Holden goes with Naomi, Amos, Alex, and this medic dude. And they then have to deal with all the insanity that kind of comes with. And see, he confides in Naomi, who's another kind of great character who is vastly smart, but is like trying to figure out kind of what's going on. I want to know more about her. Pretty much she's figured in the OPA, which is considered a terrorist faction because they want the belt to be independent. But he confides in her that he was the one that upped it because he didn't like that the other people were bashing on his girlfriend. She's like, you should keep that to yourself because this could really screw him up. And it kind of does because they get on the ship, they see somebody had breached into the Scopuli, and they're like, what the fuck's going on here? And they find a Martian transmitter on there. It's like, what the hell's going on? But then they get attacked by this crazy ass ship, and they're trying to get out, but they decide to nuke the Canterbury, and that's where it kind of goes completely nuts. They, of course, are kind of fucked up in the middle of space, and they're like, that's not a ship that we've seen before. So that's where it starts building up to their side of the whole kind of mystery of what the fuck is going on, and why did they nuke the Canterbury. They're pretty much trying to, since it was a Martian transmitter, they then decide that, oh, okay, Mars probably has something behind this. This, of course, starts a Cold War kind of, well, a heating up of the Cold War of what's going on between Earth and Mars as we get our main Earth contact, Undersecretary Avasarala, who is another great character that I like, even though she does some horrible things because she like tortures this dude to get information out of him and wanting to know about like stealth tech and everything that was stolen, and even uses her one friend who's the ambassador to Mars, who was planning on settling down on Mars, to pretty much throw out this information to try and figure out what's going on, because Mars is like, look at all our stealth tech, and of course that outs their whole thing, and of course he gets screwed over. And it's really kind of cool is he's talking about this story that he knew her when she was a little girl, and she changes the game because she plays to win. And he's like, wow. When you get that little information, you're like, wow, that's just. It's a nice balancing of showing and telling, because we have now seen that she will manipulate people to achieve her goals, even if that is a horrible thing to do to someone. Because winning to her is more important. And then having him relay this little kind of story really gives more kind of depth to her character. It's not like, oh, she'll do anything to win. You're actually giving an example of when she was a kid, she looked at their card games and then changed the rules so that way she could win. She's like, whoever races to that tree first and reaches it wins. And it's like, what? Because see, that shows that she understands she can be playing one game at one moment while she's already like playing another game to get her into a better position going forward. This is the kind of character she was as a child and has probably become even better at as this adult. And she's got her own kind of crazy complicated past with like Mars, because her son was killed dealing with stuff on Mars and everything like that. She has her grandson to deal with and everything, and all that kind of stuff that's brought up when she talks with like Holden's mom to kind of get information on him, and that's where we learn why he does what he does. He's got this ideal of like knighthood and wants to help people. He was brought up by this kind of like commune to protect this patch of land, and it was kind of a losing battle, as his mom kind of relates, because she needs to understand what's going on with Holden, because he becomes a big player, because that other Martian ship that kind of comes in, Holden puts out this whole thing that Mars is the one that destroyed the Canterbury and wanted to pretty much assure that they wouldn't get murdered when they got taken in by the Martians. Now, with the information we get later on in this season, that is not the truth. But at the time when you were unsure of everything in the picture, it was a good way to get leverage to make sure that the Martians didn't kill you on sight. Because they're pretty much trying to figure out what went on with the Canterbury themselves. Which, of course, leads to them getting attacked by the same kind of stealth tech vessels and destroys the ship. Now, they're more of a militaristic kind of place, and they think Earthers are soft, and they've got a very big arrogance kind of complex. But the thing is, the captain is pretty much the only one that had probably seen action, while the other ones had been seen in simulation, and the ship gets destroyed. Not before, of course, most of our crew sans their medic who got his head blasted, and it's like, holy shit! Okay, he served his purpose, both narratively and in that moment, to be like, wow, showing how space battles are fucking gnarly as shit, because it blasted through like the whole ship to kind of like take his head out, and then they had to deal with everything going on. But Holden is able to convince this one Martian lieutenant to kind of help him get his people out, because he feels for him. He's responsible for him, because he's the one who, with his decisive action to check out the Scopulized distress signal, set in within this chain of events that has killed everyone on the Canterbury and left them to be left pretty much just him, Amos, Alex, and Naomi, the only survivors, and dealing with this crazy ass shit. And we get to see all these different kind of things going on with the stealth ship people, because they're not Martians, and because they're attacking a Mars cruiser pretty much. And seeing that their weaponry is on par with them is like, that's pretty crazy. And seeing like this one dude got his like arm injured, blasted off, and seeing the suit kind of like close it up was pretty great. They do a lot of cool ass effects with going on with space and what it would actually be to kind of do all these kind of things in space. Is like, all right. So they're able to get off and get on this. They're in this like. The thing is, one of the only kind of like nitpicks that I would have is they call this like a freighter, a corvette. It's a Martian gunship that I'm gonna at least go with, because that's the most kind of consistent thing that I can do. And it's pretty much kind of similar to like the ship in like Firefly, that kind of little kind of ship compared to how big the Donninger, the Martian ship was. It's like, okay, cool. They get blasted out, but of course the Martian lieutenant dude pretty much dies. Amos was pretty much injured, but they're able to kind of get out, and they're like, what do we do now? And then, of course, while this is going on, we get that Miller is dealing with everything going with the Belters. They get pissed off that the Canterbury was destroyed because there's ice that they needed, water and everything. So they're pretty much getting ready to go off. Riots and everything start going on. Havelock gets fucking pinned to a goddamn wall and somehow survives it. I'm like, okay. And then Miller is going on this case of Julie Mao, who at first you think's a spoiled rich girl. What is she doing? But we find out that she's the woman that we saw in the beginning. It's like, she's dealing with some really funky ass shit. And Miller just gets in his crawl. It's does really kind of cool detective noir kind of stuff with his character of like, he's this morally ambiguous kind of cop, and the thing is he wants to do something, he needs that kind of thing, that ideal to kind of go towards, and Julie Mao is that kind of ideal. He's trying to figure out all these kind of things. He sees that like all the gangs have moved out of the Sarah station. It's like, okay, this is kind of weird. He's dealing with all these like little punks pretty much trying to steal water from certain areas, and of course they're not smart about it. And he figures out that Julie would started linked up to the OPA. She really started getting into it. She really wasn't in good with her father. Jules Pierre Mao. Fuck. There's a lot of shit that fucking happens, but it's really kind of cool to see how interconnected it gets. But he's trying to do all this stuff. He hooks up with this OPA Dawes dude. The dude who pretty much pinned Havelock to the wall. He almost pretty much served him up on a silver platter, but he wasn't really going to go for that. Because he kind of knew what the cost would be to working with him. And of course, he keeps trying to dig into Julie. And he does eventually find this like data chip. And he's able to hide it before pretty much getting screwed over by Dawes. But of course, we understand that Dawes has his own motivations. He wants to pretty much take over the belt as the governor. He says it would be for the advantageous for the Belters. But we all know there's kind of people that say that they're doing it for the people, and then they do it for their own kind of power. And they're pretty much we're going to space Miller, but his other kind of partner acquaintance, Toddy, is able to help him. She, of course, is kind of another kind of foil, good Belter cop that's like, I've never killed anyone before. And of course, she kind of wants him to comfort her, but he's fixated on Julie Mao. And he's able to figure out and get information on going to... He's got all this information that she was hooked up. She somehow got racked up with this Anubis to try and link up with them for some reason and see what was going on there. Of course, he gives all this kind of information to his boss, and she's like, this all this stuff, locks it up, pretty much fires his ass. That might have been before he got almost killed. There's a lot of stuff going on. That probably happened before. No, that's because he kept the chip in his hat. Then he delivered the information, figured out what was going on with Dawes, then having her on the payroll, and he's just like pissed off. So he decides to go to the aero station because his friend Semi had the Anubis shuttle on that station just racking up dock fees. So he's like, okay, goes there. That is where it kind of starts to link up with what's going on with Holden, because they go to Tycho Station with Fred Johnson, who's an OPA dude, but he's even got a complicated history because he used to work with the UN, but because of an incident 11 years ago where there were some miners that were striking, he pretty much got put into a situation where he killed them all, and he became known as the Butcher because of that, and we see that that fundamentally changed him to working with the Outer Planetary Alliance, the OPA, and wants to kind of fix that going on. And of course, Fred Johnson wants to know what's going on, what's with all those stealth ships and everything, and he's able to take information from the Martian lieutenant without Holden and the rest knowing. He wants them to pretty much recant everything, which of course Holden was going to agree to do with the Martians anyway, but they need to find out what's kind of going on. they need their OPA operative Lionel Polanski, so they pretty much get Holden and his crew to go do that. Now, granted, he wanted just Holden and his crew of OPA people to do it, but the rest of them was like, no, we're not going to do that. They renamed the ship the Rocinante Workhorse, which was kind of cool because even Amos was like, yeah, let's go. And Amos is a kind of crazy character because he is linked up with Naomi, pretty much having her as the boss and doing whatever she kind of says or leads with. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of what their relationship is and why he is as devoted to her as a knight to a lord. You know what I mean? Like, he'd die and kill for this woman. Why? We don't have that information yet, but I'm excited to see it. It's not like, oh, there's nothing there. Holden even knows, I don't know what leash you had on him, get it back on, because he would have, like, killed people outright, even though Holden's like, we shouldn't do that. We need to figure out a better way to get through this. So they go, and they find the Anubis, and we find that is where Julie Mao was in the beginning of the series. And that there's something going on with this, like, weird goopy shit that's on the reactor. They turn on some lights, and it starts fucking freaking out, and it's like, get the fuck out of here. And they nuke it. Of course, they figure out that the shuttle launched to Aerostation, and that's where everything starts kind of coming together. They get there, and are trying to figure out kind of what's going on. Of course, the information from a corporate spy that got linked onto the Rocinante and was pretty much giving them information to the UN. They kind of find him in the ship, and because he was silent for so long, the secretary dude is like, yeah, he's pretty much a terrorist. He's linked up with, like, Fred Johnson and all that kind of stuff, so we're going to send a Black Ops team to kill him. Avasarala, of course, was at that point learning more information from the mother and all that. She evidently told him to leave so that way he could be free, and she gets, like, nice letters from him out in deep space because he's like, he had to get away from them. And that was a really good episode, delving into kind of a good chunk of the backstory for Avasarala and Holden. I'm like, that's a good one. But we see that linking up because we see that the corporate spy dude Kenzo is trying to get best way out of this scenario as possible. Amos is like, I'm gonna fucking kill your ass, dude. I don't give a shit. He did help them get through a Martian blockade because everything's kind of going to shit and everybody's blaming each other for what happened with the Canterbury, which is you find out at first I was like, oh, it was the Martians, and then you kind of go through and you're trying to figure out what's really going on. It's like, they really wanted to set off a war between all three factions. Who would gain from this? What are their motives and everything? And you kind of get that towards the end of this. But it needs... the finale for this doesn't feel like a season finale, because the way it ends, it's like... It's not a, like, horrendous cliffhanger like it was built in. I'm almost like they didn't know if they were going to get renewed at that point, and it's like, I have a feeling that I'm going to get to a point where it'll get a little bit better, where they actually are able to do a satisfactory story arc end without doing kind of like a cliffhanger thing where they're like, okay, this is a good spot to end if we don't get renewed, kind of thing. And being on the Sci-Fi Channel, I don't blame them for kind of having that kind of feeling with their season finales. This is around the time that, like, Sharknado was like the fucking prime ass shit going on for that. But we see that everybody pretty much starts converging on Eros. We see Joe Miller is there because he wants to work out what's going on. Also, a funny thing going on here is that the Mormons are building a ship to go out into deep space at the Tycho station. I only bring that up because Miller was taking a ferry over to Aerostation from Ceres, and it's like talking with this Mormon dude because they're building this Mormon ship at Tycho station to send him out for 100 years to a place, and you just get this kind of talk of, like, faith and, yeah, what if you got there and there's nothing? It's like high risk, high reward kind of shit. And he left his hat behind. Of course, we find out that Sammy was the one that gave him that hat, too. It's like, okay, that's kind of cool. I like linking up that kind of stuff. But, of course, Joe is like, I need to find this girl. I want to know what's going on with her. Semi's trying to pretty much calm his ass down, but is able to get him information to where she's at, which is, of course, the same place that Lionel Polanski's at. And we see Holden and his crew get there, and the thing is, Kenzo pretty much had alerted the Black Ops team to that, which, by the way, this Black Ops team, okay, there's blending in, but the way this Black Ops team looked, granted, they blended in pretty well. You would not expect these people to be a Black Ops team, but it's like, you can then kind of understand why. It's like they have this pretty good firefight going through. I gotta say, the action sequences in this show work pretty well. I don't get really confused because of various shifting angles all the time. And they're pretty clear on what's going on. We see them kind of dealing with that. That's when Joe kind of like gets into the effect and like kind of helps him out. But Holden's like, who the fuck are you? He's like, touch me again, you're gonna be another body on the floor. It's like, shit, dude, he knows shit. But they get up to the room, and it's the same room. Julia Mao is, of course, the Lionel Polanski person, and they get in, and they're like, don't touch shit, because they were on the Anubis, and they knew there was some fucking weird-ass shit there, and evidently they were doing all this stuff. And we get in, and we see that Julia Mao is dead in the shower with weird fucking shit coming out of her. And then we get the whole kind of low-down episode where it shows that everything reveal-wise from what actually happened. Julia Mao hooked up with the OPA because of weird, bad shit that her dad was doing. And they were going to intercept the Anubis to get whatever that thing was and to stop it. However, as the Scopuli tried to do that, they got screwed over by how powerful the stealth ship was, and she got pretty much locked in, and she then came out and saw that things were going weird, freaking out with what was going on, but the thing is, she touched it, and she got infected with whatever it was. We learn throughout that it's called a proto-molecule at this point. That's the biggest I've gotten, that it evidently responds to radiation. At first I was thinking, oh, it responds to electricity or something, but we see on Aerostation that it's more of a radiation kind of effect. So we then see that Joe is kind of freaking out, and then starts kind of like hallucinating her, kind of similar to Guy Spaltar hallucinating the Cylon woman in Battlestar Galactica, the 2000 series, not the 70s series. Yeah, it's just a similarity at this point. I don't know how far and weird it kind of gets, but we'll kind of have to see with that. There might be something more to this. It did lead to a funny kind of thing, is when they get to the Rocinante to kind of escape. Amos is saying, like, man, you guys look like shit. Perfect line, perfect delivery by that actor. It's like fucking, yes. So, they're like, we gotta get out of here. Of course, they're trying to escape, but at that point, other interested parties and scientists have figured out what's going on. And, of course, somebody's like, alright, get the fuck out of here, fine, we'll deal with this. They're trying to escape, but we see that they get in there, they figure out that it's Julie, and this Dresden scientist dude is like taking out her blood and everything, and they're going to do experiments. Of course, we see that Julie's father is saddened by this, but they're still going forward with their kind of experiments. It's like, what the proto-molecule? What the fuck's going on with this? Now, normally when I'm seeing a show, or ones that I've ranted about problem-wise, I'm like, usually they tease this kind of stuff and don't really deliver. This show, it does it correctly. It teases it and then it gives you answers. I'm like, I can't wait to see what the answers are with this, because they start messing with it and we see that, like, this is a painful fucking way to go, because it just looks horrible to go through. She's got crystals coming out of her eyes, crystals coming out of her mouth kind of thing. It's like, what the fuck is this thing? Is it created by Julie's father's company? Is it an alien origin? What's going on here? And I like being excited about that kind of mystery and stuff. It's like, yes, okay, that's how you do it correctly. So this kind of links up, and they're like going to use Aerostation, kind of like Phoebe Station, I assume, similar to that as an experiment base. And they want all the people to go into the radiation shelters. They actually blow up a ship. And they start injecting people with this kind of shit. And we see that Holden and Miller are like, we gotta stop them from going in, because something's not going right. he tells Naomi and the rest of them to pretty much get to the Rocinante and get ready to take off in like 3 hours. But the thing is, they kind of get to one, they open it up, it's like, look at them all. And then they get, it's a radiation shelter that they use to dose people with radiation. Holden and Miller get dosed with like a high fucking enough dose that like, we're going to be dead in a couple hours. We got to go find like some painkillers and shit to try and get there. And this is, of course, where we see the amping up of like Miller hallucinating Julie Mao and everything. And it's really kind of cool to see these two characters together, where Holden is more of the kind of good character, and Joe is the kind of morally ambiguous character dealing with stuff going on. And them trying to deal with pretty much essentially being cooked alive and by all that radiation to get to the ship before they die is, even though I know that there's more seasons after this, you're still like, let's kind of see how this works out. And they, of course, like, link up. We see that Era Station has been using these gang people from Sarah Station because they pay them. We see the one dude that pretty much nailed Havelock to the walls there, and Joe kills his ass while they're like pretty much setting up a thing to get to the Rocinante, and they're able to pretty much get on there. Semi wants them to leave immediately, and Amos like immediately kills him because he's like, boss lady says wait, and it's like, shit. But Miller and Holden are able to get on there to get out, and the thing is, Earth has pretty much pinned everything on the OPA, so that way Earth and Mars would like team up to like go after the OPA with the whole stealth ships, because it's pretty much been leaked that those ships were of Earth origin, but they're from like corporate. I'm thinking it's more of a corporate thing more than the Earth government kind of thing, even though it looks like certain people in the government are linked in with that. And Ava Sarala's like, I gotta deal with some weird fucking shit in this, don't I? And it's gonna be interesting to see how she rolls out in this. So there's a lot of different kind of characters and a whole lot of different kind of things. And while the Rocinante is escaping, they're able to see a dated thing that's connecting him to pretty much essentially the bad guy's place, where like the Dresden Science Institute is. And that's where the season ends. I'm like, huh, that's a place to end it. I'm intrigued and I want to learn more, but I'm like, whoa. So I really enjoyed this because the problem with an ensemble cast is you have to know how to effectively utilize characters. And it was very refreshing to see all these different characters utilized in great ways. Now, granted, not a lot of the supporting characters will delve into too much, but the strike of a good writing team is they know what a character needs to be used for. Not that it's like, oh, here's a cardboard cutout. Or a plot object. Havelock and Tavi, while not as fleshed out as like the main characters, they're not the main characters. They do their job well of showing what is going on with main characters, mainly Miller, and then seeing everything going on with like Holden dealing with Naomi, and then eventually telling the people within his surviving crew that he's the one that logged the distress call and everything, and all their falling out with that. Seeing that Alex was part of the Martian Navy and what that kind of entails and why he had all that kind of stuff going on. It's really refreshing because even though this didn't do a good job of introducing the world to you, it did a good job of getting characters to pull you in to be like, I want to know more about this world. It's not like they put like, here are all these characters, and then like didn't flesh out the world at all. There's a lot of things that they're building slowly. I wish there had been ways that they had done it more effectively to introduce the world, but it's always a good problem to have, to be like, when a person wants to be like, I want to know more about that world and that lore. One of the biggest kind of things is like, I would talk to my mom about a certain TV show or movie, and she's like, "How? Why is this happening?" And I'm like, "More, don't go that deep." And it's just like, we want to go deeper into these worlds and these lores and everything, and understand these characters and learn more and see what these things do. Like, what does this mean? How does this affect these other characters? What is this going on? That's always a good problem to have. And I'm like, yes, you got me in. Now let's see what more we get. And now, characters that I enjoy watching are like Holden. He's like my main guy at the moment, mainly because I usually like the hero kind of characters. I do like Miller. I'm really interested to see what he kind of goes into. And Abasarala really, they are going to be able to do some weird kind of shit where it's like, okay, the morally ambiguous kind of stuff where they will do things that are probably going to be bad, but we'll have to see why they do them and what are the repercussions of those actions. Whereas Holden is going to, God help that man, because he tries to do the right thing and he just keeps getting thrown ass first into like fuck nut thing after fuck nut thing. And it's like, I understand that feeling. You try and do the right thing and it's just like, fuck you hard like this. And it's like, shit. And how he wants to deal with that, and how he can deal with that, and the rest of his crew, how they're going to help him and support him through that. It's really kind of great to be like, okay, granted, there's some characters I'm like, I don't know how much you kind of added to this, but it's like, you made it a better kind of world. It's not like I'm like, you're a plot object. They did work to like make it interesting, and I'm like, I was pretty much entertained throughout this whole thing, and I was like, it was very refreshing. I really like that most of my problems with this are like, just do this a little bit better, and I'll see if they do it a little bit better. Like, it's really refreshing to be like, hey, I don't have giant structural problems with what's going on here. Only thing that I had like a thing that I could be like, this is a giant thing. I just didn't like Joe Miller's haircut. It's like, it's buzzed to one side and long on the other. And that's nothing. It's literally nothing. It's just something I didn't like. And I'm like, does this make this show any worse? Fuck no. You know? I can recognize that. I'm like, no, I just didn't like it. That's kind of why the hat works. It's kind of funny. It's like, alright, I'm just excited to see more of what's going on with this. Because it's just kind of cool to be like, with space and sci-fi and creating worlds, you can go all out and do all different kinds of things, and I'm excited to see where this show takes it, because, I mean, granted, you can see other kind of things. It's kind of reminiscent of, like, other kind of sci-fi shows and everything, because there's only a certain amount of things going on. There's only a certain amount of original things you can do, but this spin just kind of brought me in. I'm like, yeah, I would definitely recommend anybody to watching this show. Now, granted, if you're into like deep lore, like character development, fucking world building, and like character interactions, yeah. If you're not into violence and kind of like gross kind of deaths, don't go for this, because one of the endings is in the Era Station. The spy dude, Kenzo, got fucking face sucked and like brought up into the proto-molecule thing. I'm like, that ain't cool. And that thing is fucking moving around and shit. And, fuck, man. So we got our existential kind of threat that could pretty much derail anything. So that would be the other kind of comparison that I have with Game of Thrones. You've got everything going on with the fucking in-groups doing and it's like the fucking White Walkers and fucking weird-ass existential threats like, I'm gonna eat your ass. I know! And that's the setup. And of course that sounds stupid, but when you see it in action and you see it developing, you're like, yeah, I'm kind of along for this ride. Let's see kind of where it goes. So those are my opinions on Season 1. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.